Within every generation, a patriarch finds a mysterious connection with his children. Today, separated by thousands of miles, a father and his daughters come together through the use of modern technology to share their unique insights and appreciation of uncommon cocktails and everything within the entire horror movie genre. From the creators of Friday Family Fright Nights, this is Cheers and Fears.
Hello, my beautiful daughters again. Welcome to another episode of Cheers and Fears. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Excited.
Ready for this round.
Allie, you've got your lovely little co-host there, Kylo. He's helping out.
All the input, yes. We welcome families, everyone to join in.
Yes, this is open to all. So our discussion this week is going to be about Candyman, both the original back from 1992 and the new one in 2021. Originally, I thought it was a remake, but it's not, and we'll get into that. I don't really know from the notes that I took, there's not really too many spoilers that I have, but I think let's be sensitive to that as we're discussing and kind of hold off if there's certain things that are going to reveal plot lines or underlying story notes that somebody that hasn't seen the movie yet, let's keep those for the second half and kind of break into the first half here. But once again, I'm excited. Our drink this time, thanks to Lexi finding this one, and with the theme of the bees and the Candyman, it's called the Bee's Knees. I made mine in kind of a martini style. The description and ingredients will be down in the show description, so you can make one and have it as you listen to the podcast with us, or watch the movie and have one too. But I love lemon martinis, and so this has a little bit of a honey and lemon taste with some vodka, or what was the other one, Lexi? Gin?
Originally, yeah, gin originally.
I'm not a gin person, so like a lemon drop with some honey martini is fantastic. So this is the Bee's Knees, because if you know anything about the Candyman's movie, it does have a reoccurring theme of bees, which is something that I want to talk about eventually. So everybody has seen both the original one from 1992. Let's go ahead and talk about that one. Yeah,
I
Brianna.
can start. I'll consult my notes a little bit, and
Yep.
I'll say, I don't know when I should say this, so I'll just say it. I did not like it at all.
Okay.
The original?
I didn't even want to finish it when it got to a certain point, because I was just like, okay, can this end already? Which I don't know, doesn't always happen with horror films, but I guess right off the bat, which is common for films in like 80s, 90s, whatever, horror films, the main character is often a woman. I didn't like it. I thought the main woman, she was strong and awesome throughout the whole thing. So that was super cool, even though she was obviously going through not only like actual horror, but like, you know, relationship stuff. And she was a graduate student. So she was kind of excelling in her career in that. And there were moments where it was evident that it was supposed to show kind of like sexism or whatever, you know, where they were all talking with colleagues and whatever, and they were kind of testing her a little bit in her knowledge and her, you know, whatever. Anyways, so right off the bat, I kind of noticed that there was a strong female lead, that she was obviously beautiful, which was just fine, whatever. And it began kind of slow, in my opinion, because I'm in horror movies, I'm like, okay, right off the bat, we're going to get scared with whoever the main villain is. They introduced it pretty early on. And it took me, well, I mean, maybe this is the point, but it took me so long to understand the concept. Like, I didn't really do much research going into it. So without doing research, for me, I found it really hard to figure out what's going on. And sometimes that's a good thing, but I don't know, I just struggled with this one. I wasn't scared. It wasn't a horror movie, in my opinion. It was just kind of a bad movie that made no sense sometimes. But that's my take, my quick take.
So okay. Lexi, what were your thoughts?
Well, I guess I'll just chime in, because I do agree with Brianna a good amount as far as the having to take in the context of which the film was made. So the early 90s, so this was still a prevalent time of, you know, sexism and, you know, certain themes in movies, especially horror movies, which is still done today. But for me, I think the parts in the film, in the storyline that stood out that transcended the sexism was the fact that this female character was strong and very sure of herself. And she was in graduate school and pursuing this research, her thesis with her female, partner. And she was challenging her male, what would you, I guess colleagues or her supervisors, or, people who went before her in the field. And I thought that was really awesome. I think they did as much as they could in that regard for the time. I like to give a little grace because this movie is pretty old, almost
Yeah, like older
30
than
years old.
about my age. Yep.
Yeah. So
Older
yeah,
than you.
but looking beyond that and past that, I thought it was decent. And I think a comment to make, and maybe something we can discuss, however brief, is the concept of a horror movie not necessarily being jump scary or, creepy scary, because I think what was scary about this film was the social commentary and the metaphor for society and, the political sphere and just to be very blunt, just racism. It's a pretty heavy theme. So I think it's one of those things where like reality is scarier than any made up story, but I liked it. I'll just say that. It wasn't my favorite, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I like the 1992 Candyman. I think because you both touched on really good points, especially as far as like I tried to look at it more as like the themes too, a lot with like the poverty and racial profiling, but also like an overall takeaway for me is just kind of attributing, if you will, daily life horrors to like urban legends or a mythical creature, if you will, and kind of pulling it that way, because again, for those who have seen it, you can kind of see how that builds and builds through the film as far as like what that really means, and not to stray too far from the 1992 one, but I think the newer Candyman 2 really sets it up that way too. I think it's a little more symbolized than what they tried to do in that.
Yeah, and then with the racism and stuff like that, I was going to touch on that for the reboot and stuff, about how I really liked their portrayal of like society and societal issues and stuff, and I could see what they were trying to do in the first film, or not the first film, but the 92 version. So that was, just because I didn't like it doesn't mean I didn't appreciate certain things about it or what they were trying to do. And maybe watching the reboot made my opinions for it even worse, just because it's an older version, and obviously I guess the effects are a little different when it's more modernized. But yeah.
Well, interesting, and I appreciate I love hearing the things that you ladies pull out of that, because I tend to go into a movie much more technically searching. I look for elements of the type of cinematography, the storyline, that the screenwriter's trying to use, the director. This is a Clive Barker film, who was a god to me back in the 80s and 90s, just because of what he brought to that genre of horror. Yeah, interesting that you guys pulled out different things than I did. I was impressed because I actually remember seeing this movie back in 92, and what I thought of it back then, trying to remember compared to what I think of it now, with how our society represents women in horror, Black people in horror movies. It was such a huge, different type of thing to see back there in 92. The fact that Tony Dodd was selected as the, not really, well, I didn't want to call him a villain, because there was a part of you that felt for him in the storyline. They let you see a backstory to this killer, and you had, I don't know, you were empathizing a little bit because of what had happened, and not that it ever justified him becoming this psychotic folklore person, but it was interesting how, and I wonder if that was more of the additions, if Clive Barker originally created that character with a Black man that had been wronged, and what the legacy was able to come out and avenge that, or if it was the people that had kind of contributed to the screenplay back then. So rewatching it now with 25 years or however long later, even longer than that. I appreciated some of the things, but I was also, like what, I don't know, Brianna, if you said it, there wasn't a lot of jump scares, horror. It was just a different technique back then. I think that there wasn't as much subtlety. There was more in your face types of methods with how they wanted to scare you and creep you out. But the objective of creating this mythical thing that if you look in a mirror and say his name 5 times, and all of a sudden it became kind of a thing that bled into society back then, like kids and people were like, oh my gosh, let's, do we really have the guts to look in a mirror and say that 5 times and to conjure that? I loved, yeah, I still haven't even now, but I love the fact that I think that's what Clive Barker was trying to achieve, was something that would challenge people in that day and age to carry it with them outside of the theaters, wherever they saw it, to become kind of a tone to a subculture of the horror movies back then.
Yeah, something that I did notice about the 92 right off the bat was the fact that you had to believe for Candyman to actually be able to harm you. I felt frustrated at first because obviously the main character is going to say it. That woman, she says it in the mirror. So you're like, okay, when's she going to die? Because other people say it and they die relatively quickly. But then she said it and she messed around and, then this whole thing started and now she's like, well, okay, I can't spoil too much, but there was so much in the interim, which ended up being okay in the end because I got to understand what, Candyman was, what his intentions were with her, other than just to kill her. But I thought it was cool that you had to it reminded me of, funnily enough, it reminded me of Peter Pan when they all had to believe in the fairies, make them be alive. So
I do.
Yeah, I do believe in Candyman.
Oh, I love that. That's kind of a funny way to think about it. But yeah, you're right. I think totally that's a huge theme in the film, is it really only has power over you if you give it power, right? I took away from both films, it can be different for multiple people depending on how you break it down. The hive, if you will, of Candyman. So it's not just really one.
Bernard Rose, the person who directed that one, actually, from what I understand, came from a history of music videos. So it was just tiptoeing into the world of horror. I almost want to watch the original again now that I've learned that with seeing, because that is a big launching pad for a lot of directors when they go from music videos, because they have all these non-traditional methods of visual artistry and how they shoot and edit and put something together, that when you apply that to a movie genre, it expands it. It gives viewers who love this and are ready for a consistent thing, but it all of a sudden starts breaking out a certain thing. So right off a hand, I don't really remember anything from the 92 version that I thought, well, that was kind of music video-y, because the music videos were done differently back then. But I was fascinated to find out that that's the history that he came from, as in comparison to Nia DaCosta, the female who has done the new one, and what her background is superiorly different. I love when it feels like, if you're in a creative writing class or something, and you have a concept and everybody in the class is small groups and you're giving a topic and everybody's given the same topic, but then you collectively come up with a storyline. And then at the end of the time, you all share what you do. And it shows how small little collections can take the same concept and create something amazing, individual of each other, but it becomes just so unique depending on who has the input in it. And so a movie can be a completely different movie with a different director or a different main actor, actress. And yeah, it was one of the things that I noticed.
Something I noticed that I loved about the reboot was the color scheme.
Yes, I have a lot of notes on that.
Yes, so pretty, so deep, so fall, so nice. So I don't know, it was beautiful. It was like, and gosh, and I would look for, in each new shot, I would look for each of the colors. Like I noticed right away, there's a pop of red a lot. And so I would look in each shot like, oh, what's the red supposed to be? Sometimes it was his hat. Sometimes it was like something else in the background, whatever. And I just thought that was really fun because it creates such a good mood. I'm all about creating like the mood and the vibe of the film so that I can really be engulfed in it. And those colors just kind of really spoke to me and kind of drew me in and really like solidified the darkness and everything like that.
Yeah, good point.
I like
Who's
the
the direct-
warm, more yellow and honey lighting because I feel like you typically more see like red and blue, especially a lot more of the blue tones in like the 90s genre, which I love. I mean, like Final Destination kind of thing, you know?
Mhm.
And I even have one of my notes, like even for the newer one, you know, where they've got an early on scene and the partner, I feel bad I don't have her name noted, but Anthony's partner and the dress she was wearing even gave me very like honeybee vibes or honeycomb vibes. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was really like apparently hyper focusing on bees and hives because I noted that on you know, a few different things here. Speaking of, if I would, because this is one of my favorite notes, I know on our last episode, Lexi, I think it was you that made a note as far as like opening credits really setting a film for
Oh
you.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
for me, right, okay, so the 92 version, it's all like these aerial shots, right, going down the streets through the cities, like looking down skyscraper view. And then on the newer film, it was opposite. You were looking up. Do you guys remember that?
Interesting.
yeah.
Like it was just basically the same shots or whatever, but you were looking up versus looking down. And I didn't know, I should have tried to look up to see if there was, you know, inspiration or thought on that to kind of pay homage back to the original. But I just thought that was really cool.
A quick note that I wanted to make, a couple of them, but Brianna and Alicia, you guys were talking about the color scheme and themes in the remake or the reboot, which is technically kind of a sequel, whatever. But
Yeah.
very James Wan of Nia. I don't know, just thinking of Malignant and Insidious, and even The Conjuring. It utilizes the lighting quite a bit to set the tone. I thought I wanted to make a quick note. Dad, you mentioned the director of the original one. He was originally a music video director. And I don't know if it has any relation, but the music, the soundtrack for the original Candyman, it struck a chord with me. And I don't know if it did for any of you guys, but the music, the main song, which I looked it up and it's, I couldn't find what it was called just now because I forgot to write it down, but it was composed specifically for the movie, but it's very horror movie like feeling. And I was like, I swear I've heard this before. It almost reminded me of like the Halloween theme for the Halloween franchise. And I'd have to listen again because it's been a while, but I just thought that music played such a huge role for me in the original, where it's like if you heard that song that was written for the movie, because it was sprinkled throughout and put in different scenarios and scenes and stuff, when you heard that music you were like, okay, like it's about to go down and something's going to happen, I got to pay attention, you know, because this is the Candyman's theme right now, so to speak. I don't know, I just wanted to comment on that because I really enjoyed the music for
Like the little piano like ditty.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're referring to? Yeah. Or what would you call it? Little piano riff. I don't know how you would refer to it, but yeah, I can hear it in my head now. And I was really listening for like to try to pull that too from the new one to see what it would sound like. And also both of them, they have a lot of like the like choir like singing, you know, in the background of a lot of those, like the kind of build and the drop as far as kind of like bringing you into, so that within the, yeah, you're right, it was just the little piano part sprinkled all over, was because then when you hear that you're like, oh, Candyman.
Yeah.
Quite.
Well, I noticed in the new one it was a kind of a different type of riff, but it was something that was almost, and I made a note of it because it was unsettling at first. When you first started hearing this repetitive rhythm of this note thing, it was almost annoying, but then I realized it became unsettling, and I knew that that was intentional. And the volumes that they would play it at and the times that they would intermix it, when you knew that it would start to become more predominant in the music bed, was the same thing. It's just you heard this little overly repetitive thing. This is in the newer version coming up and start to dominate, you know, that you're like, cool. Okay. It still was unsettling, but then it was the cue. It was something's about to go down.
It's about to go down. Yes. Love that.
Appreciated that. So it was, I definitely pulled that out of that from the reboot. Yeah, the newer version.
I was gonna just note here quickly too, because I was thinking about it just in terms of before we get like more into like spoiler and detailed, but the way in movies when a lot of times they're trying to introduce, you know, a monster or a certain storyline or, you know, something like that, they'll have a new, like a different actor kind of going through it and introducing it that doesn't really have any relevance to the film later on, but it's just to purely show the monster or, you know, whatever. Because in the 92 one, you know, you've got the couple and they're like, oh, you know, there's this thing where you say Candyman 5 times in the mirror. And then in the new one, it was all told through like these paper cutout puppet looking like art. And that was one of my probably favorite things because they do that really throughout, right? Because it was in the beginning and I think a little bit in between, and they ended it, you know, that same style, which I thought was, I don't know, a really cool touch.
Yeah, no, that was
something, but yeah,
it was, well, to be honest, it reminded me right away of Harry Potter when there's that story being told about the wand and the cloak and then death or whatever. So it reminded me of that. But I think I agree. I thought that was so cool. And I don't know if that was supposed to be some play on the fact that it was like an urban legend type of a myth, type of a story, like it's, you know, make believe or whatever. It was really cool though. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so risky for them to do that. I thought about it as soon as I started seeing it, where they were using the little cutout things and it was very raw. You could see the hands and the wands and stuff, but as they were telling the stories and you were hearing the narrative with these little cutouts interacting and the arms moving and stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, love that. It was so brilliant. What a good risk that they took. And if that was Jordan Peele's input on that, it was brilliant. I loved it.
More childlike, right? Like scary stories as you hear as a kid kind of thing. I think it gave it that sort of vibe. Well, even too, because in the first one, or the 92 I should refer to as, I feel like a lot of that and like the art, right? It was kind of more on the walls in the building or like seeing things in the graffiti and stuff like that, which maybe they connected it then by, you know, main character being artist in the newer one. I was kind of looking to see if they'd have.
I wondered that too. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so.
Yeah, because Candyman wants to manifest to come back alive through the avenue of this guy. And yeah, I'm right on the edge of giving some spoilers here. So maybe I won't go into that just yet. But yeah, I was looking for that connection too. It's like he's an artist and I trust that they're paying homage to the original. So looking for those connections at some point. And one of the visuals, it doesn't ruin anything, but there was a couple of times in the original one was the hole in the concrete wall with the painting of the Candyman figure with this mouth opening and then something would come out through that. They kind of tried to hint to that in the new one, but they didn't completely redo that. And so I was kind of impressed by that they didn't just rip it off, you know?
Right, just kind of easily just kind of go back to the same move, basically. Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about mirrors though, you guys.
Okay.
Mirrors now.
Well, one of the things that we can start to resolve with the first one is I just want to talk about the presence of Tony Dodd in that time period. So he was huge. I mean, physically huge. He's like 6'5", you know, mid 200s for weight stuff, a big presence guy. And so he was easily, for the stature, given that icon of a evil horror figure and stuff. And it's amazing what he has done. He's done hundreds of movies in his career, but he's still known for Candyman. You know, he's been doing movies. He did several before that, and he's done, I swear, 100 movies since then. But you check out Tony Dodd, and he's like known for Candyman. And so I love the fact that, and I've seen interviews with him too, that he loves that. He's got no problem being recognized as Candyman, and I trust that the writers, Jordan Peele and somebody else that helped write the new one, Wynn Rosenfeld, that they probably had some kind of respect and connection with Tony Dodd. To just kind of, I just love that, as well as the portrayal of Virginia Madsen. She's a huge decorated actress. I mean, she's nominated for tons of awards. She's won several awards. And so it's interesting to see, because the horror movie genre always seems like it's still kind of a subgenre. So if somebody's in a horror movie, they're really not a class A, you know, top level actor, actress and stuff. But she was and is. And so for her presence in that movie was, I don't know, I think that was a bold move for her, but I think it kind of did help the movie a little bit. maybe saying, well, Virginia Madsen's in this one, check it out. And I think her presence did pull some things through that may not have been done by a weaker actress.
Oh yeah, no, that her acting was, I always thought, spot on. It was she did such a good job, even though like I didn't super enjoy the film. I super enjoyed her acting. I think she really did an amazing job with all the scenes that she had to pull off and situations and moods and face expressions. Like everything was pretty good. So I'm not surprised to hear that she was A-list or is A-list. So yeah.
Another thing I don't want to, I mean, we can start to transition into what can potentially be spoilers now if you want, depending on where your notes are, because I've got some more notes. But the theme that was used originally as bees in the first one was hordes of bees. And did you ladies notice that, where there was a lot of bees in the movie, and Jordan Peele's take and Nia DaCosta's take was much more subtle about that.
Oh,
it wasn't this mass hordes of like bees everywhere and stuff. It was, I loved when just one or two would show up, and just it was still prevalent enough where you noticed it, but it didn't seem to just fall onto this like, oh my gosh, hordes of bees, it's scary. I love the subtlety of it.
Well, and I love in the 92 one, I mean, the scene, you know, he's the jacket's kind of opening, and then you see exposing like the, you know, like the chest, and there's just these bees in and out of like the flesh and the rib cage and everything. And I'm just like, oh, Candyman. And then, yeah, I was waiting to see if we'd see some of that in the newer one, if it was going to be the same sort of thing, but no, because you see this, are we kind of transitioning over if I start to leak more?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, just as then Anthony and the newer one, I mean, after that, the little hint, the little kiss from the bee, if you will, right? And then that just kind of slowly festers throughout the film. And yeah, you still never get the horde of bees, but as he's just like transforming that side of his body that you later see, I'm like, ew. And as we noted earlier, Brianna, I think you agreed with me, the bee sting growing. I first was like, oh, Spider-Man, you know, spider bite-esque. The powers are growing.
I think as far as the bee theme being toned down quite a bit in the newest version, it almost makes it more realistic of like a horror, you know, like this could be rooted in reality, where it's like, if I see a bee now, I'm probably going to think Candyman, you know, because it's probably I'm never going to see a horde of bees. But if I see, you know, a couple, it's like, oh, okay, Candyman. But then another note to make, I guess, is you could say that in modern horror movies, they're a bit more subtle in a lot of ways. They don't try as hard. So maybe that's just another reason too. But I just really liked the reality of these films, specifically the modern one. It just really, for me, continued to pull at the fact that this was, although at times and throughout pretty far-fetched of the goings on, it was still related to a lot of just social commentary and a lot of stuff that's just like, this is real life. This is the real world. And it even mentioned, you know, issues as far as like murders and killings of Black Americans that actually happened. You know, it's just rooted in reality, which is something that I really appreciated.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's an element of horror, you know, relatability that makes it horror, or that feels like it's so close to home. And so you do elicit more of a reaction to it. I love that as well.
I think that's what kind of helps it stick with you, right? Where you recall it, even, you know, getting up and the movie's over, it still sticks with you in that way when you're able to see it, right? If you're reminded by it for just different themes and relatability in everyday life.
Now, back then, I don't remember, you know, close to 30 years ago, what like interracial types of relationships, how that was viewed, if it was still kind of on the edge. To me, it didn't feel like it was a taboo subject or something, but it was interesting that they chose that type of, how they made it look taboo for that time period. I mean, when Candyman's character back in was it the late 1800s and stuff, when the legend had started, you know, so obviously back then that wasn't heard of, or what just wasn't discussed. And so for them to make that a sign or an act of such evil, and then for a man to be punished for that, but then be able to be given vengeance for that, you're kind of like, yes, you know, kind of like rooting for him to avenge his love and to come back on that. So it was, but a different intention and method for the reboot. You know, it wasn't really about that. Well, did you guys pull that out, that it was still about the lost love and to reattain that?
I don't think the original, and this was one of my notes, the original story of Candyman and his character and his origin wasn't very emphasized in the modern one. And I think At first, I was a bit upset by that, just because I am a sucker for, franchises being true to the beginning of it.
Mhm.
But I think, well, and I'll just say this too. Before watching the reboot, I looked at reviews for it. I was very stoked. And a lot of the reviews were negative. And they were negative because they said that it was like not scary, too political. And
Oh,
I was like, okay, shoot. So, I love the political commentary, the social commentary, and the metaphors and the symbolism. I love that. I'm here for that. But I wonder why people are saying that that's a negative thing. So it kind of like lowered my expectations for the film. So anyway, I guess my point is this newer one, instead of maintaining the specific emphasis on Candyman's original story, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but it emphasizes that, it's more of a social movement, a social reckoning, where it's like the beehive, Candyman's hive, is all these people that have been, violently persecuted against because of their race. So it's not just the original Candyman that matters here. It's every single
yeah.
of these other individuals. So that in turn, left me feeling so much more, I don't know, fulfilled by the story, instead of it just relying solely on Candyman, the original's, origin. It was so much bigger than that in the reboot.
That's right. And do you guys find that Jordan Peele tries to do that, to give a little bit of a message beneath the artistry of the film, with the other stuff that he's doing?
Yeah. And I mean, absolutely. Why not? I mean, when you have those platforms, that should be, something you can utilize, right? Just being able to bring more light to something that someone probably wouldn't expect to, have brought to them, when you just think you're sitting down to watch a scary movie, and it leaves you thinking and like maybe asking more questions. And maybe that's kind of a goal, right? To be able to like, yeah, I want you to be entertained by this film, but I also want to bring light to certain things that really probably doesn't have a light shed on it most other times, depending on what you are exposed to and what, your environment and your culture and the climate is like around you. That's so much power in the movie magic, just to be able to talk about that stuff, right? Without like directly saying it, maybe, right? To kind of present
Symbolism.
it in a way that's more palatable. Not that you need to make it palatable, but just to be able to educate and be able to, have more of that, to be able to use like right as a spark to spark a conversation.
Yeah, just spread awareness. And just a quick note to add then, something that I don't think I've ever seen in any other horror movie is that at the end of the credits, it shows a website created that you can go to for more information and to kind of find out how you can contribute to the good cause. And it's candymanmovie.com/impact. And I just thought that was so great.
Wow.
Yeah, the only other, I really never, I guess, right, it depends on what you're watching too, but again, being able to use that platform, because that made me think of, anyone who has watched the 13 Reasons series, that also was something where like, it was telling a story, but it was also, touching on the fact that these are real things, and there are resources, and these are things that need to be talked about, and there is help out there. These aren't things that are just, no one's alone.
That's probably the ability of pairing up Nia DaCosta and Jordan Peele versus Clive Barker and Bernard Rose back, 20 years ago. It's two white guys making a horror movie versus a team of African-American people saying, let's create a piece of art, entertainment, but also make it matter, put some intention behind it. And that's cool that people can do that this day and age with art, considering that films are art.
Well, especially in horror films. I mean, you can think of integrating these topics and these questions into dramas and thrillers, whatever, but horror films, it's a little bit different.
Well,
But
Jordan Peele has completely revolutionized the placement, I think, of horror in Hollywood. Because like I was saying before, even my perception of films in the horror genre always seemed like a secondary type of film. I mean, there's some iconic horror films, The Shining and other things that are still in the genre of horror that are fantastic films, the storyline, the acting and everything, but they still don't get recognized with awards for music and writing and all that stuff. So Jordan Peele has tapped into something here that I think that community is starting to recognize and admire. It's cool that he's able to do that. And with, I don't want to butcher his name, the Yahya Abdul-Mateen, the main actor. So he was in Us with Jordan Peele, that Jordan Peele had done, which I haven't seen yet. So maybe we'll have a Jordan Peele episode sometime. now that he has been, I thought he just crushed it in this new movie emotionally. You know, you saw more so of what I think you typically do in some horror movies. You know, he was much more affected, I thought, and he was human, but yet also taken over by all this. And then I found out that he's going to be the new Morpheus in the new Matrix movie, the younger version of Morpheus. So excited to see his career as it goes.
Yeah, I really I couldn't help but compare the main characters of each film. Obviously, the first one being a woman, a student, and then the other one being a Black man, artist, or a student of art even. But it's interesting comparing what they went through. I mean, we're doing spoilers now, I assume.
Yeah.
So obviously he's transitioning into this evil character. So he's an innocent man, good guy, who is also the bad guy. He's turning into the bad guy against his will. So he's still the good guy. And everything that happens to him, it's different than what happens to the main character, the first one, because Candyman wants her, but not to continue. Well, it's just different. It's a little different. And what he goes through, he's like a struggling artist and this, and she's a struggling student, but then she ends up, you know, everyone thinks she's crazy. Now she's a crazy person. She's a woman who's crazy. You know, she gets arrested. Later on, she goes to an insane asylum. Like, very different events and things that she has to conquer versus what he has to conquer. Because it's kind of a silent thing that he goes through personally, comparatively. Because obviously what she goes through is so explosive with the baby and the neighbor. And one thing that I found, well, it was, I feel like probably very 90s or 80s or whatever, was when she was going to investigate the Ruthie situation. You know, Ruthie, who was killed by Candyman, whatever, the neighbor of the person. They were going into Cabrini Green. And she starts talking to the little boy who's sitting there about this gruesome murder. Like, you know, did you know her? All this, like, what's going on? And did you see anything? Like, he's this little boy that's so unrealistic and irresponsible of this graduate student woman, professional woman, just inquire to this, you know, 6-7-year-old boy about the horrific stuff going on. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. And also, I had noted too, something about the first film was obviously there were bad things kind of happening to potentially to the baby that was kidnapped and everything like that. And horror movies that integrate bad things happening to young children, I find not as, maybe I'm just too sensitive or whatever, but I find not as enjoyable at all. I feel like that's an element of horror that maybe it's too horrific for me, and that's why I don't appreciate it in a horror film. So, you know, to each their own. But I did notice that yeah, there was a lot of, like, I don't know, darkness around young kids. And I guess, you know, that's about what's it. I guess that happens in it as well, but it seems a little different. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
No, I think it's a good point. It always sits different depending, I guess, on what is happening around, you know, kids. But it's also that thing where, like, if if it's a child that's being used as the horror, it's like extra creepy. I don't know what exactly that is, but it's extra creepy. But I liked in the newer one you know, the storytelling wasn't like directly Candyman. It was Helen's story, Helen Miles, so Virginia's character from the first one. And then you guys probably picked it up a lot sooner than I did, but I did not make that connection for Anthony until he went to visit his mom. Anthony, that's the baby.
Yeah.
You know, and it took me so long. And when that happened, I'm like, what was I doing? I'm like, that's Anthony, of course. I'm like, and then so when he finds, you know, when his mom is like telling him the story of like how it was really, you know, how it really happened, or like what her take and what was all going on, you know, as far as like Helen trying to save him from the big burn pile and Candyman being in there and trying to take them down. And just like, oh, here's where like they're making that like really strong connection and keep, you know, continuing that storyline. And then it just really, like, you know, rockets from there. But
did anybody else pick that up before? I didn't either.
I did, but it was just, I just watched them back to back, you know, so I couldn't help but. So that was the only reason. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have. But I did. It was cool how it was the same actress that played the mom, that was the young mom in the first one, and still the mom, obviously, in the reboot. Yeah, thought that was.
Well, that's what really hit it for me, because I saw her and I'm like, she looks exact. I'm like, that's her. That's the baby. Oh my gosh, here it is. Okay, so good.
I thought it was interesting that it kind of shows a legend from different perspectives. So like folklore or like a, you know, a myth or a legend, it has a very specific storyline and a very identifiable, usually bad guy, good guy, or good side, bad side, whatever. And what I liked is that in the beginning of the reboot, it's telling the legend of Helen Lyle, and it's you hear it, and after, you know, because you've seen the first one, or if you'd seen, you know, the original one, you're like, that's not what happened. That's not how it went down, you know, and you know, and so to get that and to have that be like Helen Lyle's legend that went down, you know, that carries on the Candyman, you know, myth and whatever. And then to have, I think, what was her name? Like Anne Marie or something was the mom, her character's name. I can't remember, but her perspective to be shared of like, this is what happened to you. And this is what Helen did. She saved you. You know, I liked that because that was something in the original movie that kind of got me worked up, where Helen, her character is going through all this stuff that's out of her control. It's happening to her and with her, but she's, you know, it's not by her own free will. And you have society, like Brianna, like you were saying, you have how society is reacting to her. She's a villain now, she's crazy, she's a murderer, and all these things. And you're like, but that's not what's happening. You know, she's not wanting to do these things. She's just being, you know, controlled by Candyman. And I value that sort of multiple perspectives of the same thing. How there's multiple ways you can interpret something. Yeah. I liked that.
Yeah, I thought that too. At first, when it was like being told and carried on, you're like, wait a minute, that's not how it happened. But they make good on that, so that's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's exciting to see, you know, some of the careers that I think are being recognized because of this. You know, not that this is what is really bringing Yahya Abdul-Mateen into the forefront of Hollywood. I think he was recognized as a phenomenal actor prior to this, but being able to kind of spread his wings in the horror genre as well as now in sci-fi, and he's already done some amazing dramatic things. And I heard that Nia DaCosta is doing a new Marvels film, so I mean, she's branching. She was kind of getting into like horror type things, I think, and she did a couple of movies called Little Woods and Ghost Tape, which I kind of want to go back and see now, just because you see what a director can speak through how they put a movie together. And I kind of like to see consistencies and see if I connect. It's like, oh yeah, I like their methods, otherwise I don't. So interested to see how, yeah, where she goes with that. But yeah, I'm glad that you girls talked about the puppetry things. That was one of my biggest notes, was that how it was interwoven and then concluded. And then I think, Lexi, what you were saying, it was continually credited with, these are all the generations or iconic people that had been affected. It wasn't just the Candyman person, it was this person and this person and this person. And that is the message that was trying to be whispered and unspoken. It was, you know, there's the legacy and the avenging of the wrongdoings. It's coming out in a very bad way, but it needs to be recognized. And so I thought that was a good little punch home in the end there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, with what I've seen of Jordan Peele and his movie work, I think there was probably no better person than to be involved in a reboot of Candyman. So yeah, and you really need to see Us, and if we do an episode on that would be, because that is, you are gonna have a fun time with that, I think. So
okay, well, maybe we'll do a Jordan Peele episode, because I was a Key and Peele fan, so I knew him as a comedic person. So for him to completely, he has just given a whole new life to the horror genre. You know, I loved horror anyway, but what Jordan Peele is creating, it's so much more. There's stories, there's drama, as well as being scared. And so he's doing some fantastic things.
Definitely necessary in the horror field, because it's, in my opinion, started to get kind of stagnant. You know, it's obviously hard to make an original horror idea, and there's so many remakes and shows like the Scream show and different things like that just kind of, you know, we need some new, fresh, like James Wan, he has his own little take on things that he likes to create and everything. So we need some new, fresh ideas and new ways to get scared.
Yeah, well, he seems to be giving us these characters that we connect with. And even though they're supposed to be in the storyline, they're supposed to be evil and bad, we are cheering for them. We're empathetic for them. And race has nothing to do with how much you can take away from that as a viewer, as a part of appreciating that art. You know, it's not just And I think even Jordan Peele has said that too. He's not just making movies for the African-American culture. He's making movies for everybody that give us these personifications of people that are challenged or having things against them. And so you root for the bad guy, and it's kind of fun.
I'm okay with that.
There's like this quote that I just wanted to say. It's just regarding the legend of Candyman and how, you know, when you think about how folklore and legends come to be and how it's the origin of like information passing down between generations, and how, you know, that just is just how like human nature has evolved to tell stories and things like that, and to forewarn and whatever. And the quote from the movie, I think it was said by I can't remember his character's name, but he was the owner or the worker at the laundromat that ends up, I think his character name started with B, but he said, Candyman is how we deal with the fact that these things happened, that they're still happening. And I just thought that connection between that is like, for me, just because I was looking for these, you know, social commentaries, and I felt, you know, so I don't know, it just was such a feel good movie in that way, like almost cathartic, that it was talking about these things in such a different way than we're used to through a horror movie. I think Brandy, you said that, but to have it like said in that quote, you know, where it's both talking about Candyman, the movie, the horror movie I'm watching, but it also is talking about that, you know, social relevance and just heaviness, and that just reality just hitting you in the face through the metaphor of Candyman, you know, this villain. I just thought that was very impactful.
That's right. I thought that, that was very powerful when I heard that too. Yeah, glad you mentioned that. Ellie, what did you say about mirrors before?
Oh, yeah, I had a lot of stuff in here. I mean, right, because obviously that was very heavily used. And I mean, right, to be honest, I think anytime, because it's used in a lot of movies where they have that, where the mirror in the bathroom is like a cabinet that you open, right? Creepy.
Yeah.
Glad I don't have one. But so I had a lot of that too. And as far as like referring to mirrors as, you know, kind of like a stalked by your own reflection kind of idea, and more of like going, you know, through them and kind of entering this other dimension, or, you know, and a lot of that too from like the 92 one where they literally, when they're at Cabrini Green and then she takes the mirror down or whatever. But, and so like too, when I was watching the reboot, always kind of looking for reflections, because I feel like there are a couple times they just kind of had a little bit of the reflection of the Candyman for the reboot movie at that time. A couple of them were just snuck in there, but then when he was over, you know, Anthony's over doing that interview, you know, I think it was a critic, right? But then she was wanting to interview him as far as, and she like excuses herself to go to the restroom, which of course I thought meant Candyman's going to get her. Not quite how that went down, but instead that whole time Anthony is standing in the mirror and the reflection is the direct, you know, view of the Candyman. What was, do you guys remember what was his name? Does anybody remember? I can't now, but because you're first introduced to him. Yeah, you're first introduced to him when young Anthony is down. He went to go do laundry or something, I think, right? And then he comes through the wall. And of course, at that time, I was like thinking, oh my gosh, right? Like, okay, introducing us to Candyman right away, which they were, but he was actually a real person in that. At that point in time, offering the bits of candy.
So do you think that there was intention in that, not only in the original one, but the homage given in the new one, that speaking into a mirror, looking into yourself and conjuring something that comes from your own reflection, revealing evil? Do you think there was some symbolism in that, where that's what the statement was, is look into yourself and realize that there's evil in there if you give it some
power.
True thought. If you give it power.
Yeah, true power comes great responsibility.
Again, with the Spider-Man references.
I mean, I can pull from Freddy Krueger, right? He gets his power. You got to believe in him. You got to be fearful of him. He comes to life too. It's a very, you know, similar if you get down to the detail of it. I also, you know, figured do a couple notes as far as like there's the scene where Anthony gets in the elevator and it kind of goes blackout, and so you can't see anything, but you can hear there's like this like it's like a crunching sound, which you hear in a lot of movies. I don't know if you guys could directly remember it, but that scene just hit me, because as far as things that, you know, either made my heart race a little or like little goosebumps or something, it was that one. And then I'm not making this very smooth now because I'm just running through some of these other notes, but I have a note on here about not going down into the dark, creepy basement. There was, you know, an actress that chose not to, but she was still taken. Not fair. And then of course they didn't skimp on at least a touch of gore for us when Anthony was given his hook hand.
That one kind of got
We got a
me.
taste of that.
I didn't expect that one. Yeah. I replayed it in my head for the rest of the movie. I'm pretty sure when it happened, I was like, whoa, okay, whoa.
Yeah, and that some of the vulnerability things that have been, like when people lose limbs in movies and how that does, it's very uncomfortable to watch. And then, like you're saying, Brianna, how it carries through and it just kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies. But there was they were very graphic in that. So, which they
I
can
liked
do
the
these days.
hook. I liked the shape of the hook though.
Yeah.
It was like kind of pointy, kind of not just like circular.
Mhm.
It was cool.
So the fact that the laundromat guy had the hook and wanted to give power to the legacy, and that I kind of struggle with that a little bit. But I don't know. I let it go in context of everything else that was going on at the time.
Yeah.
I think what I interpreted it as is like one way that you can handle the situation, like, you know, social oppression, you know, where it's like you can choose to be very angry and resentful and transfer that in a violent, vengeful sort of way, quite literally. Or, you know, for example, there was a scene at where the girlfriend, I forgot her character's name, she was at the dinner with some very prominent people that she didn't want Anthony to ruin for her, because it was like the next step in her career. And one of the female role models that this character was having dinner with made a comment that, you know, you can come up to New York, I'll have you meet my friends, and you can fight this on the inside, so to speak. And so, I mean, I just thought that potentially, you know, maybe that character's way of carrying on Candyman's legend, well, it feels good. And you want these bad people to die, you know, sometimes you want them to feel pain just like they've caused other people to feel. It just makes you maybe step back and think, is this really, it's one way to go about it, but is it, you know, the best way to go about it? I don't know. That's what.
I mean, yeah, that's for the guy who helped Candyman with his new vessel or whatever. Yeah, it was maybe all he thought he could do that could make an impact that he thought needed to be made, you know, because he can't help from the inside. So he's going to do what he knows is going to work somehow.
I get that.
Yeah, I think I eventually, you know, after a little while, I gave it enough credit to just say it was a social act that he could do. You know, he had been carrying the hook to him was the legacy and the wrongdoing, and that what he could do to then give power to somebody that could start to make change, you know, so the social injustice that had happened, that was his contribution to that. He was going to have, it's like somebody in a riot who's yelling out something or throwing something, they got to take part somehow, you know, so that was what he could do. I'm sure it goes deeper than that I probably I probably should have pulled more out of it than that, but that's what I took away. Well, it's been fun, and it's kind of cool to contrast two different movies with consistent storylines. I'm actually glad it wasn't a reboot, because in knowing, as soon as I heard references in the new one to the old one, I thought, oh wow, my expectation had completely been redirected with what I thought was going to be done. But I thought it was so great that Tony Dodd got to make a cameo in the end, and you know, that was awesome because he was the original.
I was
Candyman.
waiting.
Yeah, I wondered too. I thought,
Yeah.
you know, he's still around in Hollywood. He's still doing stuff. So the fact that he makes an appearance was great.
I saw his name in the credits before watching the film, so the whole movie waiting for him to show up.
I didn't know that. I wondered. It was purely a curious ride for me the whole time, thinking, are you gonna see him, or are they gonna do another actor that looks like him? And so that was good. Jordan Peele did right by that. Nia DaCosta did right. So. Well, thank you, ladies. Once again, I enjoy just the discussion and the intellect that comes from all of your insights on how you watch movies and you experience movies, and how we get to share it together. and how I learned from you, and I get to share with you. And my bee's knees drink went pretty fast. I may have to make another one of those. So thank you. So until the next time, cheers.
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 Love you all.
Love you too.
Love you.
This has been Cheers and Fears. Be sure to give a 5-star rating and share before it's too late.